My name is Brian Stim. I'm the Product Marketing Manager for Display Products here at Marin Software, and I'm joined by Rob Lenderman, co-founder and CEO of Boost Media.
Hey everyone, good morning or afternoon.
And what we're going to be talking to you about is increasing your display advertising performance through image optimization. So there's some really good practical tips and best practices that you'll go through in this webinar and hopefully find relevant for your purposes. So as far as the agenda, we're going to introduce you to what image optimization is, and then we're going to dive in a little bit deeper, talking about how you can use your paid search insights to help build your display strategy. We're going to take a quick step back then and talk a little bit about segmenting and targeting your audiences. And we're going to go into just some practical recommendations on how you can optimize your display advertising campaign, and finish this webinar with some Q&A.
So, welcome. My name's Rob. We are Boost Media. So Boost Media is a company founded a number of years ago. Its goal is to increase advertiser profitability and learnings using both professional human optimizers and proprietary software. What you're going to see today is some stuff that our company's done and Marin's done together to improve performance. And we do this for a number of very large brands, but many of these things you'll see today apply down to the SMB level.
Thanks, Rob. And for those not familiar with Marin Software, we are a leading advertising cloud. And what we do is we help advertisers and agencies save time and money by measuring, managing, and optimizing their advertising campaigns across search, social, and display. And specifically, we help marketers take their proprietary first-party data and then target and convert their audiences. So with that said, why don't we jump into the meat of the presentation?
Yeah, so I'll start off. Sort of the need for image optimization. If you look at, there's sort of three pillars of pieces to online advertising. It applies in both search as well as in image optimization. By the way, we're going to use the word image and display interchangeably a little bit. Most of what you're going to see today not only applies to traditional display advertising, but it also applies to image advertising in terms of social and mobile and things like that. So this is segmentation, all those concepts apply. So traditionally you've had audiences, you've had segmenting, targeting. Marin's really great at that. You've had cost. What are you willing to bid? What's your budget? Marin's really great at that. And then you have creative, and that's the one that's been difficult for years because it requires humans and it requires people to make emotional connections and all sorts of things, and that's what Boost is targeted at. So combined, we have a really powerful relationship. So if we look at display advertising in Q4 of 2014, you'll see here that search response rates are much higher than display response rates. What's important here to understand is that's why everybody loves search. People actually do things from it. One of the complaints people have about display advertising is that the response rates are so low, you don't get the volume, and the level of effort is very high. And so what we're going to show you today is how to get those numbers up and get the response rates up to a level that the effort makes a lot more sense, the process makes a lot more sense, is a lot more efficient, and so it makes a lot more sense for your company to do more display advertising. So what is image optimization? A lot of times when you think about search, it's about perfecting your bids and perfecting your keywords and things like that. But image is a little different. Those two are certainly components of that, but it's actually the practice of enhancing your display ad creative to improve performance and gain actionable insights. It's actually not very useful, and one of the things we're going to show you today is it's not useful to do things and increase performance if later on the marketplace changes on you and you have to change your tactics and you don't know what to do. And so we're going to get into how to learn. So why should you be doing this? So obvious answer is performance enhancements. You get more clicks, you get more conversions, everybody's happier about that. The second is differentiating from your competition. When you do this type of optimization, one of the key components is to improve performance, and you do that through differentiating. I don't know if you've ever gone to Google or you've looked at web pages where all the ads look the same. Nobody knows where to click. There's no incentive. There's no emotional connection. So differentiating is another key goal of this. Appealing to customers' emotions, another way to elicit a response, that 0.2, 0.4% response rates on displays, that's how you get that up, is by connecting with people. Remember, we're just people advertising to people. We're not computers advertising to computers. And then message diversity is something that's important because it surfaces strategic insights. You learn what works and what doesn't. One of the goals here is to educate the other parts of your organization, educate your landing page components of your organization, educate your offline components of your organization, what works and what doesn't and why. It makes you look like a genius to the CMO when you're the one saying what works and what doesn't and why. And that's one of the goals of this. So these are a number of examples that we've done. And we talk about differentiating yourself. And so when you try to differentiate yourself, it's not just about showing your product. That's actually not differentiating. It's about getting into what makes you different. And so you'll see here a number of different ads that mix different components depending on what you're targeting. Some of the game components show in-game play so that people can see what's going on and kind of understand the game a little better. They can see how they can play word chumps with friends and things like that. They also can see how you can help get a mortgage and how it's about money and all sorts of different things. So it's important to try to differentiate, not just by showing your product. So we're going to run a pop quiz here. One of the things that people always ask, and many times your apologies to the creative directors on the call, but many times the creative directors think they know the right answer, and the real answer is that we don't always know. And so the testing and the variety of tests is important. So let's run this test here, and let's have you look at these two. So this is a pretty simple one. So if you get this one wrong, you definitely need to be testing more. So take a look at this. I'm going to give you a second, and then pick which one you think is the right one. It's the one on the left or the one on the right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay. So let's take the poll here. Okay, so the poll is up, and people are voting. And let's see what's going on here. Okay. Oh, this is good. This is what I hoped for. Yeah, this is really good. Okay, so let's show the results of the poll. So the results of the poll. What does this tell us? It tells us that most people actually do know the correct answer is add to, but it's very close. And so unless this score is like 90 to 10, this is a great reason for testing. And so if you look at this one, let's show the so it was 192% better. So the fact that 60-40, yet this one is 192% better is a huge reason for doing this. Now, why is this better? There's a couple of components on the one on the right you're going to see. Look at backgrounds, look at animation, look at the sort of funny nature of certain things. So let's talk about this. So let's go to this. So get emotional. So this is one of the key components of ads. This applies both in search and in image optimization. So you're trying to connect with your audience. Get a positive emotional response by being funny, by connecting to the feelings that people have. This one's really funny. I love the first one, a royal flush beats 4 of a kind, implying it's a poker ad, but it's actually an ad with urinals in it. So this ad did really, really well for one of our customers. And then the other is Beat the Bear. And so it's similar to the one you saw earlier where we're showing the bear sort of getting beat up in the game. It implies that it's more than just the traditional, matching 3, 4 in a row games that you're used to playing. Some of those being very popular. And so this one kind of goes another angle. And it sort of joins that disco bees with bears. And so it's like the traditional bees and bears having a confrontational relationship for many reasons, going back to, I guess, Winnie the Pooh. And so it's important to try to appeal to these types of emotions to get people to elicit a response. So let's look at an ad. Let's break it down. There's really 4 components here. So there's backgrounds. You saw some of those earlier. There's characters that you put in there. There's call to actions that you put in. And there's logos. So these are the 4 components. Let's break it down a little bit and talk about each one separately. So logos. One of the things you're going to want to test is what's the type of logo that you have. Obviously, you have a main logo, but many times you have multiple variations of a logo. This is one example of that, where they have Farmville one on top of the other, side by side, an abbreviation. So these are types of things that you want to try to test, not only location, but also just the brevity of some of them. Backgrounds. So we talked about that one as well. You saw a little bit of a different, brighter colored background in that ad that won. You'll see here, you've got a couple of different ones. Rolling hills, you've got some sort of farmland with some mountains in the back, and then you've got a pond that is there. Again, very important. Notice nothing else really changes. There's very, very few changes in the other pieces, but the backgrounds change quite a bit. So this is a very important component to test. What's nice about these is if you think about how images are built, it's pretty easy to swap backgrounds in and out. So once you've built them, which is the hard part, swapping them in and out and making multiple variations is an easy part for you to be able to test. So call to action, the third component. This is where colors play a big role in this. Historically, in the early days of the internet, it was like orange. Orange worked. Our company colors are actually orange because orange really worked back then. And so I wanted a button that elicited a response. That's not necessarily true. As universal truth, we find that sometimes other colors work, depends on the background, depends on a number of different things. So test these. Easy to test once you have the core components of the ad down. Characters. So this is another one. This is an example of where this game in particular has multiple characters, and we tried multiple characters. You'll notice, again, call to actions or logos stay the same, backgrounds are the same, but we're testing different characters. So this is that concept of where you start testing lots of different aspects. This is where the number of ads that you create becomes very large, because you start thinking about multiple characters, multiple calls to action, multiple logos, all these sorts of things. The number balloons fairly quickly, especially when you add segmentation. It balloons very, very quickly, and that's one of the issues with doing all of this. I'm going to show you a little bit how to simplify the problem. So as we look at image and display optimization, it can be a daunting task. It's a thing that you look at and you go, where do I go? What do I do next? So one of the things you can do is using search insights to build your display strategy. So our company, Marin's company, both give you a lot of insight into what's working in search and what's not. And you can use the search to learn. So as you think about making informed decisions on your display advertising and what to try next, what's the next background to try, what's the next new original creative image to try, there's 2 paths. There's data from search, and there's your experience. What have you learned? And so both of these paths sort of get you to the same goal. You're trying to get to the same goal of finding something better. But at the end of the day, one of them is much easier. So let's start with the hard one. Experience. These are your gut reactions. These are historical tests that you've run. As you saw from the poll, gut reactions aren't that accurate. It's not very useful. These are difficult because creating images is difficult. So starting from scratch is complicated. Production is expensive. Resources are scarce. Many of you have creative resources, but they work on the website. They don't sit in the marketing creative section of your company because you probably don't have one. So it can be expensive, or you outsource it, which means it's even more expensive. It's also hard to scale. As we mentioned, when you try to test all these different variations and you throw segmentation into the mix, we have customers that test thousands of variations, and thousands of variations is very hard to scale and to test. And we're going to show you a way to shortcut that. So data from paid search is the way to do this. So one of the reasons that paid search is so nice is that it's text. So not only is it easier to create text, but it is also scalable. You can test variations through Excel templating. You can test lots of variations in lots of different ad groups by changing a few words per ad group. It's very cost effective. You can do it on your own if you're a search marketer, or you can get the guy that sits next to you that does search marketing to help you with this. He's probably doing some of this already. This is actually a core component of our company. You can also test multiple variables, so you can try different messages. You can mix and match messages to see what piece is resonating, and it's easy to scale. You can create lots of them. It sort of addresses all those problems you have over in the image side. So let's look at how to actually do that. So if you look at the text one here, we've got shop top quality diamond rings, customize the ring of your dreams, shop hundreds of styles. So what are we doing here? We're making emotional connection through the ring of your dreams. We're talking about how you can customize. We're talking about it's a top quality. Lots of things we learned from this. And if this works well, then we can translate that into an image. So what did we do here? Well, we stole components from the text. We talked about creating your ideal ring. So there's an emotional connection as well as a tactical, you can create this on your own. It's not just looking at thousands of options and trying to filter through them. It's actually creating something that fits you. You'll notice here, again, logos, call to actions, all that stuff's there. Components you could test is obviously button colors, different rings, but this looks as to be a high quality ring that you can customize. So it's important to use those things. So now we're going to talk about segmenting.
All right, thanks, Rob. So in this section, we're going to take a quick step back and sort of talk about segment and targeting your audiences using different data points. And I think, this topic, what I really like about this topic is, us in ad tech, we talk about data all the time. But when you think about the ads that have made the most impact culturally or even in your lives, the ones that make impact are the ones that have a visceral emotional connection. So, all the greatest data in the world won't do anything if you're not able to make that emotional connection. But on the flip side, without data backing up your segments and your targets, your targeting efforts and your positioning, the best creative in the world is going to fall flat if you're reaching the wrong people. So, this is a general process you might take to optimize your targeting efforts, segmenting, targeting, positioning. This is sort of marketing 101 basics. But what you'll want to do is you want to take your total audience and break them down into different actionable segments. And you're going to try to identify different audience clusters based on different actions that they take, different intent signals that you can gather from them, and so on. We'll go into more depth on each of these in the following couple slides. And then ultimately the goal is to be able to identify which audiences are the most valuable to you and determine which audiences are showing the most intent. That'll give you an idea of where to focus your targeting efforts. Now when you're targeting, you're constantly balancing reach and return. Do you cast a wide net as possible and trade off on a cost-effective targeted reach, or do you try to hone in on a particular high-value, high-intent audience while trading off on volume and scale? And identifying audience segments based on their value and their likelihood to take an action is going to help you prioritize where to put your money and your efforts. And then once you've identified your target, you'll have to figure out what are the optimal channels you want to take to reach these people. And the channels are important because that's going to impact your creative approach. If you're focusing on social like Facebook or Twitter, the creative canvas is much more limited compared to targeting users using a standard banner ad. Obviously, mobile, like how mobile or not mobile your target audience is, will make a big impact on where you might focus your dollars and effort. And then finally, you want to establish your positioning. And again, there's nothing necessarily new here. It's generally marketing 101. But the idea here is that once you've identified the value proposition, you want to test communicating it in a number of different ways, sort of like Rob has mentioned. If your value proposition is that you offer a phone with the longest lasting battery, the specific images, specific language you take is going to differ based on the audience, whether you're talking to a teenager who's constantly messaging, a power user who's spec obsessed, or a parent who doesn't want to worry about their phone shutting down at the wrong moment. So all those things play into how you communicate a particular value proposition. So let's take a look at breaking down audiences by actions, intents, and characteristics in more tangible terms. Generally, with new audiences, your targeting opportunities are a little bit more limited because you don't have a ton of data on them. You might be able to do some broad targeting based on factors like demographics, psychographics, prior on-site behaviors, geography, and that's generally sufficient because if you're branding, you're generally trying to cast the widest net as possible in order to drive awareness. However, once you've engaged with the user, that's when your options for segmenting and targeting really start opening up. Generally, to keep things simple, we look at building audiences based on actions, intent, and characteristics. And with actions, the most valuable data you have, and we've mentioned this a lot of times, is the data that's occurring on your site. You can look at things like, what pages has a visitor viewed, what products have they engaged with, what conversion events have they committed to along the way. And then on the intent side, search intent is one of the more interesting signals and the one we tend to talk about because of our focus within the search world. And you can get super complex with how you incorporate search intent signals to create audiences, but at the basic level, a few you might want to look at include users who come in off a branded term, whether that's your brand or a product brand. These people tend to have higher intent levels. Unbranded searchers tend to be higher up on the funnel and more in the research stage. Promotional terms like free shipping or discounts will give you an idea of what kind of customer you're dealing with and what message might resonate with them. And competitive terms give you sort of a mix of all of the above, in that the customer might have an idea of what they're looking for but still remain open as far as their purchase decision goes, and gives you an idea of what sort of messaging strategy to take. And then finally, with characteristics, characteristics give you some basic idea of the audience makeup, the demographics, geographies, what brands and products they've expressed an affinity for. And characteristics aren't going to give you a ton of actionable insight alone, but they do provide some great data to help overlay on top of your existing strategy. So again, let's dive a little deeper into a couple examples. When you drill down into things like page views and conversion events, what things are we specifically talking about, and how can you map those behaviors by value and intent? So let's take actions through, let's say, page views, for example. Path-based retargeting is the most common type of retargeting. However, you can glean insights beyond what products they looked at. A person who's viewed just one product is likely a different value than someone who's viewed multiple products, or whether those products are within a particular category or across a different number of different categories. Similarly, if you look at conversion events, if a user abandons their cart, what does that mean? You might want to try out by targeting them with creative that encourages them to get back onto the site and complete the conversion. However, if they're not responding to that message, maybe it's an indication that they weren't as close to making a decision as you previously thought. So you might go one level up. And you might look at what's their behavior prior to abandoning the cart. What other audience segments could they possibly fall into? And then going across into search intent, as I mentioned, you can break down intent signals into a few basic categories. And let's look at the branded segment. So if you're a retailer, you commonly have two types of branded searches. One is around product. So for example, like Nike basketball shoes or Adidas soccer shoes. And the second is if you're lucky enough to have some pretty good brand awareness, you'll get searches around your brand name itself. For example, basketball shoes at Foot Locker. And this type of insight will give you a head start as far as figuring out your creative approach. Now, when you organize segments based on unbranded searches, you realize these people are further up in the conversion funnel, and they're typically still researching or maybe comparing different options. So your approach at targeting these users is going to be different in that while you'll still want to sort of leverage a strong brand element in your imagery, the value proposition and the way you propose it is going to vary. So at the basic level, you can create audience segments based on individual actions, intents, characteristics, and that will give you a pretty good start. But eventually, though, what you want to be able to do is take all those different pieces and tie them together and ultimately create audience segments or audience personas. So, for example, if a particular user or particular visitor arrived on your site, clicked on a branded keyword ad, looked at a few different products, added an item to their shopping cart, and then left early, the combination of those signals is going to paint a much more fuller picture of that potential customer than if you were just doing standard sort of cart abandonment retargeting. And you can go across the board where you're sort of mixing and matching different signals based on how valuable they are and how much they show whether a particular user has intent or not. And finally, you know, as I've alluded to, when you're segmenting your audiences from a practical standpoint, you're almost always trading off scale and volume with your ability to target and reach. So when you're identifying these segments, you want to ensure that you're checking off on these following boxes. First is the audience's value measurable. Can you measure the performance and the ROI reliably? Second, are they reachable? And more specifically, can you reach them reliably? Are they cost effective for you to target? Third aspect is, and very important aspect is audience scalable. Certain segments are going to be smaller, but at some point you're going to need to determine how small is too small. When you find that you're putting in more work to be able to effectively target and service a particular segment, then you probably have narrowed that segment down too much. Fourthly, you want to ask yourself whether your audiences are truly differentiated. There's a tendency to get to slice and dice a little bit too much, but if they're responding the same way to different messages, then there's a good chance that they might not actually need to be distinct audiences. And finally, question is, can you take action? Can you put together a legitimate value proposition for them? Can you put together a solid program or ad campaign for this audience? And that sort of ties into the preceding points. Now, with that said, I will turn this back to Rob, who will dive into some recommendations and best practices on how you can start implementing image optimization.
Cool. So we've talked a lot about some of the methods and the segmentation and all sorts of stuff, but then where the rubber meets the road, what do we actually do, and what's a process? The key here is you have to create a process out of it. If all you do is wander around and randomly pick where to test and don't test in a systematic way, you're not going to learn a lot, which is a key component here. You're not going to be able to articulate to anyone else in your organization what you've been doing and how well it's been working. So what do? The first is prioritize. It's easy to look at your account and find a number of different places that need work, but it's important to prioritize. Some of the variables you use is obviously the spend, how big something is. The second is if something is woefully underperforming where it needs to be in order to make sense. The second step is the creative producing it. And this is the hard part. This is where some of those learnings from search can help you do this. Obviously, there are internal resources, external resources, but it's important to focus them on the things that need to be tested, not just trying to do 1,000 things simultaneously. It will overwhelm your organization. The third is testing and measuring. So now that you've found out where you're going to test and you've figured out what you're going to test, actually running the test. You need a way to track this. If you try to track this on a piece of paper, you're going to get lost. You need to either use Excel, things like that. Our company, Marin's company, help you do this, but you need to be sure that you're tracking your performance over time so that you can understand how well you're doing compared to how much effort you're putting into it. The fourth is determining learnings. So this is really important for follow-on steps, which is, can you learn something? What worked, what didn't work? How do you use that to then go to step 5, which is creating more images to test? What background worked, what background didn't work, what character worked? Stick with that and run with another variable. And then prioritize again. Look at what worked, what didn't, and where to continue the next work. So let's get a little practical guide here. So craft a clear and distinct call to action using the text learnings. I can't stress enough how important this is. This will save you an enormous amount of time by using things in your text ads to resonate, to facilitate the beginnings of your image ads. The second is refreshing ads frequently. A lot of times, especially in the social world, things will fatigue out. It's important that you prioritize work where fatigue is occurring as well, so that you're not just working on new stuff, but things fatigue out over time. So the third one is really important. It's very subtle. It's have flexibility with creative testing. Many of you are going to have a brand, and you're going to stick to that brand, and you've got a Bible for your brand, and you're going to follow that. I would encourage you to push it. One of the things about testing that's very, very important is that you're actually showing new messaging to your customers and potential customers, and they will tell you what they like through performance gains. So push your brand. Try things that you wouldn't normally put into a very expensive offline campaign. Test here so that you can learn new things and then push those to offline worlds where things are even more expensive. Connecting the ad creative to your landing pages. So it's important that they be aligned. However, many people take this too far. They think if you say something in the ad that is absolutely the only thing the landing page should say. That's not true. The ad should elicit a response, a click, a visitor. The landing page's job is to take that visitor to the next step, conversion or signing up for emails or whatever it may be. The landing page has a lot more real estate. You can say a lot more things in there. So it's important to pull out the messages in your ads that elicit the visit, and it's important to take that a step further in your landing page. The last is mobile is here. Many of you have maybe recognized that visitors from mobile don't necessarily convert very well when they visit your desktop optimized site. I don't know about you, but I firmly believe that until the online experience is seamless for mobile, people aren't going to buy a whole lot on their phones. I don't know about you, but I don't fill out 20 questionnaires to buy things. I use apps, and I use 3 questions and things like that. So it's important to think about how you're doing this. If you're going to be optimizing for mobile, don't be surprised when performance is low unless your site is also set up for it. A little trick we found is that if your site is set up for mobile experience, mention it in the ad. If you say in the ad that this is a mobile optimized or a phone or buy on your phone and things like that, people make that connection automatically. Your conversion and visitor volume will skyrocket. So make that connection if it's a reality. So these are a few things that if you follow these, you'll be well on your way to improving performance.
All right, thanks, Rob. So at this point, we'll take questions, any questions that you guys may have.
I guess one just basic question we got that we can start off with is, how do I actually do this in my account?
Sure. Well, I think there's multiple answers. You want to talk about segmentation? Because that's obviously
sure. So from an action standpoint, like I mentioned, there's some basic segments that you can take a look at. And the way I would go about it is prioritize what's most valuable to you. So if you're looking at actions, cart abandonment tends to be a pretty good signal of a user's intent. So start off by just capturing that audience segment and then sort of build out further. Like if you have particular products that you want to ensure are driving high volume and high sales, you might start categorizing audiences based on that. And similarly, on the intent side, if you're capturing search intent, the basic thing you could do is you could start categorizing different keywords. So, for example, like I mentioned, one of the buckets you might look at are branded keywords. So you might take all your brand name keywords and group them under a folder or dimension, so you're able to see people coming in off those terms.
Yeah, and I'd say from a practical side of the image optimization, there's a couple of key pieces to have in place here. The first is tracking. Making sure that you can articulate to others what you've learned. The second is prioritization, work in the right spots, just a segmentation. One of the key things here that we didn't really mention is the ability to do this will allow you to articulate these things to the rest of the business. When you do that, the rest of the business will see you as a center of learning for what we should say next, and you can take that and get more budget for things like this. Many times you have to start off in a covert way by not allocating a lot of resources, but when you show a little bit of movement in your business, others will recognize that and want to fund and support it. We see this time after time with our customers.
And how does this apply to social?
Yeah, so from our perspective, social is very, very similar. Remember that ad fatigue thing that we talked about? It occurs more frequently. It's a frequency thing that you see the same ad over and over on Facebook and you decide not to click on it anymore. So swapping things out is very critical. Testing new colors and designs is very critical. A lot of times just the fact that you change can provide an impact. So it's same process, just a slightly higher frequency of iterations.
Great. And what's the difference between B2B and B2C when it comes to optimization and segmenting?
Yeah. So when it comes to the actual creative, I think you can think about it as remember we talked about that emotional connection? Depending on the product. So if it's a B2C product and it's diamond rings, you're going to try to connect with people on a different emotion than, say, an email software package that is not going to, it's not about love and romance or finding the perfect ring. It's about saving you time. It's about making your life easier. So a lot of times the real difference isn't B2C versus B2B. It's about just finding the right emotion that you should be connecting with. And once you find that, that's your answer.
Great. And how often should I be testing in my account?
So as far as our experience goes, what we end up doing is we essentially run a always-on test for the display ad campaigns that we're running. And what we find is that, sort of like Rob mentioned, you get fatigue along the way, and what you'll see is that performance will increase to a certain point, and then at a certain point it'll level off and start declining. So there's always, we're finding we're always trading off between one creative, a targeting strategy, and if you're running those tests sort of continuously, you're going to be able to access that insight, as you need versus trying to figure out ad hoc, why a campaign isn't performing as well as it used to be.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. The always be testing philosophy is the right one. You obviously can't test in your entire account, so prioritization is very, very important. The other is that many of these tests will take weeks and weeks to run, so it's not something that you're monitoring hourly. It's something that you check in every day, every other day, every week, depending on the volume. You can run back-of-the-envelope calculations to figure out roughly how long it's going to take statistically to find differences. And so check in at that frequency. This is where tracking and prioritization are very important. How frequently should you be looking at things? Some tests are more frequent than others.
Great. And what is the best way to track my progress?
So I'll give you two answers from my perspective. The first is use some software like ours and Marin's, because obviously we do this at scale and we make this easy for people. But if you don't have that, you can't afford it right now, whatever it is, then what you want to do is you want to be able to set up a system for tracking. Mostly Excel is what people default to, where they're tracking things in terms of when you started the test, what's the frequency of check-ins, what are the two ads that you're testing, notes around those kinds of things. Marin has tools in place to handle this as well.
And just to add to that, I think when you go into the testing process, I think it's helpful to go in with the hypothesis to test against. So when you hit a milestone, whether a test is performing or not performing, without an idea beforehand, you're essentially just sort of waiting to see what will happen without necessarily being sure when there's an actionable point.
Great. And this will be our last question here. As mentioned earlier this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are, we'll be sending out a recording of this webinar. Yeah, and so I'll get to our last question. Should we give more weight to segmentation or image optimization?
Cool. So we're going to fight it out. Winner gets the answer. No, the answer is both. So the question is practically and tactically, how do you do that? Let's imagine an account where you have 0 segmentation and you have 0 image optimization. Segmentation is something you should look at doing. If you're finding in your data that there are 2 segments that perform differently, you should segment. If you have some segmentation and you've never done any image optimization, then looking at how to optimize those segments is the same. This is sort of a lifting all boats. You want to do a little bit of both as opposed to all of one or all of the other.
Yeah, I mean, if you had 0 segments, doing image optimization alone is probably going to drive some results. But, I mean, you know, just creating 2, 3 segments doesn't necessarily have to be difficult. And when you do so, you can be more effective in the creative tests you do run. So, you know, if you're optimizing for a homogeneous group of 1 million people, you're only going to get so much benefit from that, versus if you can divide them into 3 separate segments, 2 separate segments, then you can at least have a different, more compelling message for each, and you're going to get a better result from that sort of testing.
Yeah, I mean, a practical example is we showed you a diamond ring. The message that you show to a man is different than a woman. And so without segments, you would show one message and you would be mixed results. But by a simple segmentation like that, all of a sudden you have an easy optimization test to run.
All right, great.
Excellent. Thanks for attending our webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.